She was like checked out.
Runs out.
In general.
Alright, everyone here okay? For those of you who don't know me, my name is Tony Spar. I was a student here a long time ago, left a couple of years ago. My name is still around the hallway because, well, I work for Michael Gorman and he hasn't changed some of those things for a long time. Renee Gifford is here in the front row. Renee and I were both students of Michael a long time ago, and he's someone who changed our careers, changed our lives, and meant a great deal to us. So we flew in today to surprise him a little bit and be here for his last lecture, so it was a great opportunity for us. Julie was going to come up and say a few kind words, but I think she's on the edge of tears. So how many of you in here have taken a class from Michael or worked in the lab or been involved in one of his projects? Raise your hands really high. All right. Okay, so Michael's been here doing this for a very long time. When he came out, the department was very small. It's grown quite a bit, and Michael's been a big part of that. I remember when I first started working with him, we were off in a hospital building off campus. And they told me when I started, this building was going to be ready in a couple of years. And then by the time I was ready to leave, the building was almost ready, so that was good. So he's seen a lot of change. He's driven a lot of change. He's one of the most highly published authors in the field of cochlear implants, one of the most influential people in the area of cochlear implants. And I don't know how to express what a difference he's made in my life. When I started off, I took a couple of classes. I thought maybe I was going to be a speech-language pathologist. I talked to Michael about it, about my interest in science and about my interest in hearing, and he said, well, what are you doing, idiot? You need to make better choices in life and going into audiology. And I did that.
Those are probably the exact words.
Those were, I think that was actually the letter of recommendation. So, he's done a great job of, I think he comes across, how many of you felt like he might have been a little abrasive in class on occasion? That happens. I think Michael had, his approach in the classroom was very different than if you went up to his lab and you showed a little bit of interest and you talked to him. In the classroom, yeah, there may have been a couple of jokes that didn't sit well with everybody all the time. But if you knew him, they came from a good place, and he wanted to see students succeed. He wanted to see people learn, and he wanted to see people show initiative. So I've also watched him for students that came up and asked a small question about cochlear implants. They'd walk down the hall, they'd be very nervous about approaching him, and I think I'm interested in this, but I'm kind of worried about talking to him. And 3 hours later, they were asking him if they could leave because he kept coming about the area. It's an amazing career to have been a part of so many publications, to have co-authored so many works with so many different people from all over the world, to have been recognized in multiple countries for his accomplishments, to be continually funded, which is a big deal in university life, to have your peers recognize your work as significant enough to throw money at it. That's a big deal. He's had a continuous funding record for 30 years. 40? Whatever, 30. Now he's bragging, I guess. So it's an amazing career. ASU has certainly been lucky to keep him here for the entirety of his career. So my mentor, Michael Dorman, I'm looking forward to hearing his last talk here as a professor.
Well, that was very kind, Tony. And thank you. And thank you all for coming today. This originally was going to be a standard COCO talk in the afternoon seminar, because I am giving the keynote at the International Congress on Cochlear Implants in 2 weeks. And I needed to practice. This was a good opportunity. Now, students probably think that the responsibility of the keynote speaker is to give some brilliant talk. Give a keynote. Nothing like that. What's the one thing the keynote has to do? Keep on time. Because if the keynote goes over, the next guy goes over, the next guy goes over, and then what happens? The coffee break is late. And everybody is annoyed at you. And then lunch is great. And then because people come back late from lunch, the whole session goes over. And by the end of the day, the guy who invited you comes up and he gives you the old stink eye because everything has been delayed. You don't want to do that. So what I asked Corianne to do is I just have an opportunity to see how long this talk lasts. That was the whole point. And then it kind of evolved after that. Well, this is my last lecture as a paid member of this faculty. And so I have some small responsibility to say 1 or 2 things about a long career. And it seems to me that you can describe careers in science in the same way that you describe biological evolution. And the term used in evolution is punctuated equilibrium. And what that means is that biological change isn't constant over time, but rather over geological time, there are huge periods where nothing changes. There's stasis, equilibrium. And then change is very rapid, and then another long period of equilibrium, punctuated. And a career in science works the same way. We have long periods where we do the same thing, okay? Year after year after year. In fact, some people are working on the same problem they did as a doctoral student. Okay? That would be a long period of equilibrium. And what you hope in a career is that you have 1 or 2 bouts where there's this punctuation marks, these rapid changes. Now, I've been wondering why careers work like this. Why does this description of punctuated equilibrium with lots of equilibrium take place? And I'm pretty sure it's due to the Greek god Zeus. Now, Zeus, as you may remember, was fond of wandering off of Olympus and causing trouble with the young women about. And the story is that he ran into Misozyne, and he slept with her for 9 nights in a row. This was before Viagra. And he fathered the Muses. the 9 muses. Now, those muses then went out and taught humans about art and literature and science. And they are responsible for these creative bouts that we wish to have in a long career. Now the problem is, when humans were few in number, that 9 muses could get the job done, right? They go in their Rolodex and visit you, visit you, visit you. Only a handful of humans. But as we've gotten greater in number, they simply can't get the job done. And that's why, in science, there's long periods of stasis and very short periods of bursts of inspiration. We are too many. It's a testable hypothesis. Maybe not. Okay. Now, one thing about this talk today is that I got lucky and my name came up on the Rolodex about 2 years ago. And the muses work in odd ways, rarely directly. So they visited a young surgeon, Dan Zeitler, who I didn't know. And Dan approached me at a meeting 2 years ago and said, I have a population of single-sided deaf patients with an implant. Would you like to test them? I said, yes. Because the single-sided deaf patients can tell us what the cochlear implant sounds like. And I'm just dying to get my hands on it. And Dan had a small population, so it was a lot more. So, the muses finally came to sit on my shoulder, metaphorically, and this talk is about this work that we've done in the last 18 months. And it really is, I think, the most interesting work I've done in a very, very, very long time. It allows me to answer a question, what an implant sounds like, that I wanted to know for years. Now, Tony and I actually tried to do this about 10 years ago. Renee was here. And we had a provisional answer. And I'm sure that our current answer is much like that answer we got 10 years ago. So that's the background for this talk. Work we've done in the last 18 months or so. And I like it because it integrates the work I did as a graduate student sitting in the basement of Haskins Laboratories, synthesizing speech with a computer that did fit into this room, and barely. And then another period where I worked with Anu Sharma and Tony, and then most recent work on cochlear implants. Well, that's it. Again, this whole thing is just about me trying to see whether I can get a 25-minute talk to be 25 minutes. And so, we'll see. Now, a warning that we use my voice in the clinic downstairs to put children to sleep. So, please use the coffee if you like. All right, one last thing. This video, or this presentation, has multiple videos, including a very long one. And if you're a student, never ever do that, because it'll never work. Or wherever you go to present a talk, the video will not play. Right? And you'll sit there and score it. But the video actually is the heart of this lecture. So I've done the cardinal sin. And Sarah and I have been fussing about this for weeks now. And we think the damn thing's going to go. But I certainly can't. All right, with that as an introduction, Sarah, if you would hit a countdown timer, or if you would just use your phone. And I'll see how long this takes. You ready? All right, I'll put on my game face here and imagine that. Well, it's hard to do. You might not want to see it. And pretend I'm in Toronto. There's this huge room. I'll be looking at a monitor in front of me, so if I don't make eye contact, it's not that I'm avoiding you, but I'm trying to read my slides. And I'm gonna wander over here to change the slides, okay? So, the moderator tries to say something nice about me. He goes on, that's right. He goes on for a minute or two, and he says, okay, our speaker is Professor Jordan. Okay, ready? Okay. So I say something like, thank you, Ned, for that very kind introduction. Good morning. This morning, I'm going to describe for you 5 kinds of research that we've conducted in the last 18 months with single-sided deaf patients fit with a cochlear implant. The we includes the cast of characters shown on the right. Because single-sided deaf patients fit with an implant are still relatively rare in the United States, it takes a village to find them, to test them, and to have some small confidence in the results. Especially indebted to our 2 surgeons, Dan Zeitler first and then Mike Carlson, who have referred their patients to us. Without their interest, without their referrals, there'd be no project, and I'd be playing golf this morning, delivering this lecture. Now, my interest in this population stems from 2 hypotheses I can generate for how they might perform with their implant alone. Now, no, so I'm glad I practice, because that's the next bit. All right, so the 5 areas that I'm going to talk about this morning are reorganization of the cortex following unilateral auditory deprivation, reorganization of the cortex following unilateral stimulation from the CI, speech understanding with the CI, binaural function is assessed by sound source localization, and the sound quality or the voice of an implant. Again, my interest in this population stems from 2 guesses I can make about how they might perform with their implant alone. The pessimist might think that when the brain is faced with a signal from the normal hearing ear and a signal from the implanted ear at the same time, then the brain would attend to the clean signal preferentially, or it would weight that signal preferentially. And on this view, the less clean signal, the implant signal, would be relatively neglected, relatively unattended, or relatively unweighted. And if this were to be the case, then acquisition of speech understanding by the implant alone would be slow, if it had an unattended channel. Asymptotic performance would be low. And binaural function, which requires the close collaboration of 2 well-matched ears, would be poor. Moreover, because the brain always had a clean copy of the signal from the normal hearing ear to attend to, the signal from the CI ear would always be judged as poor because there was a clean copy always available. Indeed, any deficits in the representation would be made clear. On the other hand, if you were an optimist, somebody affected with Pollyanna syndrome, at least one person in this room, you might think that when there was an excellent signal from the normal hearing ear and one from the implanted ear, that the brain would take this as a perfect opportunity for learning. That essentially the good ear, metaphorically, would teach the poor ear what the signal should look like. I can imagine, again, some metaphorical FFT being taken of the clean signal, and somebody in the brain telling somebody else in the brain, that's what the CI is supposed to look like. If this were to be the case, then acquisition of understanding by the CI alone would be rapid, asymptotic performance might be high, and binaural function might be very good, because again, the good ear is always teaching the bad ear what the signal looks like. because the good ear is teaching the poor ear, the sound quality of the poor ear from the implant might be pretty good, because the good ear has taught it what it should sound like. Now, the surest way to stop a good argument about hypotheses is to collect data. And my colleagues in Europe and in Australia, in Perth, Australia, have been doing this for about 10 years. So these data simply add to that data set, and we add a new wrinkle or two. Now I'm going to describe what we've done with implanted children and adults who are single-sided deaf by reference to our first patient, and then I will describe the rest of our group results around her data. So the patient was a female child born with normal hearing, progressive hearing loss in her right ear, beginning at the age of 5. At age 9 or so, she received a Med-El cochlear implant, the 31 millimeter electrode array in her right ear. So, she has one normal hearing ear, and one ear with a severe to profound loss, and that ear is still stimulating. Now, it was my very good fortune that my colleague, longtime colleague, Anu Sharma, had also an interest in this patient and had been testing her, indeed, before I had been testing the patient. And so we have high-density EEG brain imaging, both before and after implantation. And we could, as on the top right, look at the morphology of the evoked waveform, and on the bottom right, we could look at the distribution of activity across the cortex. Now first, we're going to look before surgery from stimulation to the normal hearing ear. And stimulation to the normal hearing ear evoked abnormal activity in 2 ways. So first, there should have been ipsilateral activation in addition to contralateral, and yet the activation was only contralateral. Moreover, activation elicited activity in the inferior frontal cortex, which is usually associated with increased task difficulty or cognitive load. Now we turn to the poorer ear, which again had enough hearing that it could be stimulated. So I've highlighted the normal hearing ear and the development of the N1-P2 complex, and that complex was missing from the ear that was going to receive the implant. This complex is driven by experience, and that right ear hadn't had enough experience. Moreover, the signal injected to the right ear only produced ipsilateral activation and not contralateral activation. Now, this picture of a reorganized brain before implantation is completed by looking at the somatosensory response. This is the response to touch. This is activity, and I highlight now activity elicited by touch, which has imposed upon the superior temporal sulcus, an area normally reserved for speech and hearing function. So, clearly we have a reorganized brain in this child. Child received a cochlear implant, and now we look at the morphology and activity following the implant. This is at 1.2 years following surgery. Before surgery, N1-P2 complex was absent, and within 8 months following surgery, that is there, in fact, at normal latency and amplitude values. So you have driven the cortex into a new reorganization. Moreover, the activation was unilateral at first, or ipsilateral, and following surgery, an activation is now bilateral. Now, perhaps the most interesting change is in the somatosensory response. On the left, I've circled the somatosensory activity recruiting auditory cortex. And after that cortex has been reorganized by electrical stimulation, somatosensory response retreats to where it should have been. So, there is no question that this brain was reorganized by deprivation and then reorganized by electric stimulation. At issue then is how well does it understand speech? To answer that question, you need a set of norms. These are data from Dr. Renee Gifford. These are the Vanderbilt data, AZ biosentences and quiet, a large number of patients. Look at the 12-month data point. You see the mean score for 131 patients in quiet is just over 70% correct. Our patient with the twice reorganized brain does very well. Thank you very much. Now, it's always worrisome when you test a patient because it's likely that the next patients will do something else and much worse. So here are 3 more patients or 4 more patients with similar signal processing, similar electrode arrays. They do pretty well too. So high levels of speech understanding are possible in single-sided deaf patients with cochlear implant. Now, what about binaural function? Our measure of binaural function is sound source localization. We use a setup with 13 loudspeakers spaced at 15 discrete intervals. To evaluate binaural function for our patient population, you need 2 control groups. You need a normal hearing group, which I show you here. We're plotting on the y-axis the error in localizing the sound source. Normal hearing listeners have about 6 degrees error in our setup. Now, if you run enough normal hearing people, which we have, some 70 patients or so, you can draw the 95th percentile of normal with a high degree of confidence. We run enough patients where that line is, I'm happy with that line. It's a very solid data point. Now, let's look at the other control group we need, which is bilateral implants. Now, the signal processing of a cochlear implant compresses the interoral level differences which these patients use to localize sound sources. And one of the consequences is that small angles like 15 degrees are left with ILDs that are right at the threshold of discrimination, less than a dB for a cochlear implant patient. So we shouldn't imagine bilateral implant patients who have a processor on each side, so they have symmetrical processing. We shouldn't expect them to beat the 95th percentile, and we should imagine the best scores are going to be right around 15 dB, because that, again, is about a half dB of amplitude or intensity resolution. And that's exactly what happens. The best patients are right around 15 dB, and none of them impose upon the 95th percentile. Okay, now remember, these patients have a processor on each side, so the signal is compressed into the small electrical range on both sides. The SSD-CI patients have one normal ear and one ear where you have this electrical response, which is very different. So now the question is, how badly does that alter their performance? The answer is shown there. The answer is it doesn't get in the way at all. And these patients who have one normal hearing ear and one electrically stimulated ear do as well as these patients who have 2 symmetrically stimulated ears. Now you say again, well, this is one subject. What about the rest? They look like that. And this population distribution looks just like the bilateral CI population distribution. And one thing you can take from that is that the compression algorithm for the implant is probably coming pretty close to the range heard by the good ear. Because if they were very asymmetrical, then it would look like this rather than this. Okay. We move on to what I'm really interested in, which is what the implant sounds like. To find out, we inject a clean signal by direct connection to the cochlear implant. The implant does what it does, the damaged ear does what it does, the brain does what it does. That's the sound of the implant. To the normal hearing ear, and this is our patient's audiogram up on top, we make up a library of sounds that might sound like the implant. And we hope to get lucky. We hope one of these, they say, yeah, that's kind of like what I hear with my implant. And that was our hope. Now to show you what we do this. This would be the sentence we inject into the implant.
Thieves who rob friends deserve jail.
Okay? Now, our most common model of a cochlear implant is a noise vocoder. Now, we would have injected the original sentence, then we play this, and we say, does this sound like the implant? This is what a noise vocoder sounds like.
Thieves who rob friends deserve jail.
Yes or no? Many years ago, I asked my student Philip Luizo to write a sign vocoder for me because patients at the time had said that their implant sounded mechanical or electronic. This has that sound, at least in my ear.
Thieves who rob friends deserve jail.
Some patients have said it sounds like Mickey Mouse.
Thieves who rob friends deserve jail.
Some patients are a little more sophisticated, have seen a few more movies. It sounds like a munchkin, like a little person in Wizard of Oz. That would sound like, this is a formant shift and not a pitch shift. And every once in a while, a patient will say, it sounds like Darth Vader. I wonder what Darth tells them.
Thieves who rob friends deserve jail.
All right, get the idea? And the question is, will the patient bite on any of these? Does the implant sound like any of these? I will let our patient tell you what it sounds like.
I'll play that ear first, and then I'll play another one, and you say yes or no. Sound good?
The sun is finally shining.
The sun is finally shining.
No.
Not bad.
No. What does it sound like? It sounds like a demented robot.
So that wasn't it. That was my best guess. And
Clear, but it kind of like max.
now she tells us.
Like, if there's a wall and and there's two people on either side, if you talk over the wall, it's not going to be as clear, so kind of like that.
More like you're talking over a wall.
Yeah.
So it sounds like.
Or like you're, if you go close to the mouth and it's muffled.
The sun is finally shining. The sun is finally shining.
Force, like, did that sound closer?
Yeah.
Okay.
The sun is finally
That's
shining.
it. Wow.
Okay, play it back and forth a couple times.
The sun is finally shining. The sun is
Yeah.
finally
Cool.
Okay, as you can see, that we simply did what the patient told us to do, which was to simulate speech from behind a door, which would roll off the high frequencies. The flanging operation is a delay in add, which adds a slight warble to the pitch. Okay. Now, when you run one patient, you don't know whether anybody else will behave that way. So you run some more. Further, first, that was the match on top. Neither of our model systems, noise or sign vocoders, was a match. Indeed, they're the furthest away from what it sounds like. Moreover, the patient's match was different than our usual descriptions of Mickey Mouse or Donald Duck or Darth Vader. So we run more patients with the same kind of signal processing and the same length of electrode array. That's going to be critical, I think. So this is our patient, and then I'll pay 3 other patients who have similar processing. So this was our first patient.
The phone is finally phone.
Another one.
I like to play tennis.
Another one.
Would you like camping?
The last one.
I like to play tennis.
So I think they've all kind of in a similar perceptual space, not identical. And so I think our first patient